Hello, and welcome to BlogtorWho.
Hello.
Hello. Nice work, Peter. Looks lovely.
Oh, thanks very much. It was simple enough. I think we have a rough plan now to add music to it for the next time.
Yes, we're completely 100% prepared.
Yeah, well, finding music that you can use is the challenge.
Yes. There is royalty-free stuff that you need to have.
Yeah. I joked when I put it on our Facebook. I joked that people should add their own dum-de-dums.
Well, we could do our own dum-de-dums. I think you said we were singing it, so.
Yeah.
Well, yes, welcome everyone who's watching live on YouTube. Feel free to jump in the comments, join in with the conversation. And today we're going to talk about Wild Blue Yonder, the second of this 60th anniversary trilogy. What was everyone's gut reactions? I think this will tell, set the tone for where we're going to go with this evening.
Who wants to go first? It was kind of funny in the way it had like part one. Let's meet Newton. Then we go to the show. Then we have Wilf at the end. Now, Wilf, I'm not going to. I enjoyed it, but I found those a little bit jarring. The change from one to the other they didn't tie together very well. I think I loved the Wilf thing, and it's an interesting, scary show, but yeah, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Catherine and David doing their shtick. They were brilliant.
Peter, how about you? I mean, you were to review it.
As people, I'm sure people read in my review. I liked it. I think the one thing that works against it was, and I think on the official podcast, Russell T Davies even sort of like admitted this himself, was that the secrecy works against it slightly, because the only thing that sort of say about it was kind of like a general thing of like, oh, you've never seen a Doctor Who like this before. When it actually showed up, it was like it took a while to re-engage with the fact that like, oh no, we've seen an awful lot of Doctor Who like this before. The Doctor and the companion like tumbling out of the TARDIS and then wandering around. I think it's hasn't happened a lot, but like just wandering around the location just by themselves for ages, working out the mystery. I mean, that's basically that arc in space. It's basically Four to Doomsday. You know, if this was a four-parter, they would have had the thing of the cliffhanger of the cliffhanger at the end of the first episode would have been them finally meeting somebody else and going, ooh. But yeah, so that worked against it. But once you get past that, it itself is really good. Once you get past that and the fact that some of the effects and even the idea behind the effects are a little bit goofy. So, but I mean, it's that strange balancing act that you always get in Doctor Who, that you want it to be scary, but at the same time you don't want to literally have it be like a story in the newspapers of parents complaining to the BBC about their child being permanently traumatized.
Growing up, okay, we're all behind the set.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I was just picking up on what you said, really, Peter. I mean, I think expectations were raised because, as you say, it was described as it's not a Doctor Who story we'd ever seen before. But the whole way through, all I got was, well, this is them walking along in front of green screen. This feels like Underworld. It's wandering around an empty space station, spaceship, whatever. That's Arcade Space. It feels very much like Midnight 2.0, where once you get a handle on who the villain. Well, we didn't really know who the villains are, and still don't. But once they're introduced, and there's the replication of, who our lead characters, which we've seen umpteen times in the form of Sarah Jane Smith in the Android Invasion and all that sort of creepiness of replication. So in the end, I was just a little underwhelmed, and to be honest, I got bored. To be frank, it didn't grip me enough. And yeah, I just, it felt like a middling kind of middle of the season kind of story to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you put a great thing in your review, Peter, available on BlogtorWho.com, where you said it's not as scary as it thinks it is, and
Yeah.
I'm sure there are plenty of people that found it scary, and I hope a lot of people got more out of it than I did. But it just was a meh for me.
Because it's quite scary, but it isn't super scary. And actually, one thing that just occurred to me thinking talking about it there, or listening to you talk about it there, is that when you consider like the idea that the villains actually look like our heroes, that the people that are normally the comforting present in it, that's quite scary. But when you think about it, we've seen David Tennant and other things play really horrible, slimy villains. And in this, you can definitely see, it's almost like that awareness of the kids watching, where he holds back a little bit. He doesn't actually go as far as he does in other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that you've said that, I think I was expecting something that was never seen before, and I did feel like, well, I've seen these kind of plot things before, and I always get in trouble at home because I go and mutter something and say, well, this is what the villain is, and this is what's happening, and I picked out the wrong because they had a cut where they had the two things going, and I said, well, that one of these isn't Tennant, or one of these isn't the Doctor, and one of these isn't Catherine. Do you know what I mean? It was just very quick because of how the cut was done, and immediately, so I immediately picked up on that. And maybe I've just watched too much science fiction.
Yeah, well, I think that was deliberate, though. That felt like a moment where it was supposed to get you, without like making a big thing of it with a big musical thing. It was supposed to get people at home like sitting up and going, "Oh, but how is that possible?" Like, it's supposed to be.
I think it would have been scarier if they didn't notice it right away.
Yeah.
Because I think they didn't need to notice it right away. They could have just wandered off and then met back up together, and then we would have still been. Mm-hmm. As you said, it wasn't as scary as it could be.
I think it might have worked better if it was more pitched, if it had been sold as a thing of, this is a great introduction to Doctor Who. Now that our two leads are back together, this is the classic archetypical Doctor Who story. Yes, that might have worked better, because it is such a remix of, it's a little bit from here. It's a little, like you were saying, Bedwyr, it's a jigsaw puzzle made up of pieces of other classic Doctor Who stories. So if you'd sold it that way, as if you've never seen it before, this tells you everything you need to know about what Doctor Who stories are like, that would have worked really well. It was only like I said, it worked against itself. The promotion worked against itself by pretending it was a story like you'd never seen before.
Yes, and there were plenty of rumors and suggestions that there were going to be loads, cameos, and people were going to show up, because everything had been kept so limited in terms of publicity and the information we had about what the episode was, really based upon. And it was never going to meet those expectations, and I didn't have those expectations. But I felt that what I got didn't grip me enough as an episode. I mean, I'm just thinking now, in terms of the sets and the design, it reminded me a bit of Warriors of the Deep, because it's just overlit. And I think actually if they brought the lighting down and maybe a bit more creepier, then it possibly would have worked a bit better.
Artificial lighting, because it's done through the VFX work.
Yeah.
It was interesting, the behind the scene things. Since I've done a lot of work with that, I went, when I saw it, I identified it right off the bat. It was unreal. So it took me no seconds to realize it was unreal. Okay.
I mean, let's pick up on that. I mean, the technology used in it was good. It wasn't convincing enough. I still felt, okay, they're walking along in front of a green screen. And once you start, doing weird animations with your lead characters then yeah, it just kind of lifts you out of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's difficult. They were trying to walk down a whole tunnel, and it's difficult to get that correct on. There's a feature where you could now, as they said on the behind the scene things, where you actually see it on the set as well as what's in the green screen area, so you can see it a little bit before they're doing it, but they didn't. There's a certain amount of balance and a lot of tweaks that you need to do to get it right. And then the lighting was done. They brought up whoever was doing the lighting, I can't remember, but they were saying how they had done the lighting in there, and I was kind of interested. I found it interesting that I would have done it differently.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't have done it that way. So, but anyway, and no, I'm not a VFX person, but I am somebody who does a lot of work with those kind of developing those tools. So, anyway, yeah. So when you have a lot of VFX, by its very nature, it pulls me out because I see all the flaws, and that's probably one of the things that if it's all VFX, which this was, then I get pulled out of it because I've spent so many times looking in the corner and just go, well, that lighting isn't right and this isn't right and whatever. So you actually get pulled out very quickly. Yeah. And I think that's probably one of my problems with it, because I can see the error, all the errors or the challenges in doing it. So
it might almost have worked better if they actually had gone more underworld with it. Like if that big long corridor had actually been a model that they were compositing him into, might have worked better, because it's just your brain tells you that it's CGI, and it's like, I mean, at this stage you don't even mind it as such, but it's just the fact that I don't know, it just didn't look as well done as it could have been. But like, and it's part of that thing where your brain starts telling, like, you have to get over it to enjoy the story, but it is still there, like, just at the back of your mind.
Yeah, it took me a while to get my head around it, so that I haven't watched it twice. I've only watched the one time. Anyway, now that we've trashed Bedwyr, you need to give us starting off with positives.
Well,
take him last time where we went no, and then we go, yes, but we like it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the one practical thing they seemed to have was the robot. And I thought that was an interesting design, and that looked, it was slightly different from anything we'd seen before, and that was consistent with this, promise of the story being unlike anything we'd seen. So I thought that worked well. I thought it was slightly convenient that they arrived at the time where it was just reaching the button. And I thought the sort of the cockpit kind of set, again, was a practical chair, within a bit, Millennium Falcon about it. It was, that the sort of practical elements were really good.
I did love that chair. I love, as soon as I saw the pictures of that chair, I loved the fact that it was obviously a chair made for something that was vaguely humanoid, but not. But like the whole oversized flight chair thing, I really liked.
Well, I there were several things I liked in that, because he went to mathematics to solve the problem. Do you know what I mean? Like, which is where you actually solve the languages, through mathematics. You find that. We've even sent them out to Voyager and things. There are some steady consistencies, and people go, well, why is it base 10? It doesn't matter what base it is. It's just, can he put those to connecting to some order or something like that. And him working it out from there in a very quick manner, because he knows how many billion languages. I can't remember. Was it 5 billion?
That was a lot.
That was a lot. Anyway, so there were a lot. And then that I enjoyed. The other thing that I enjoyed was like the ping outside. You kept on hearing the knock outside, and the door opened and closed. The airlock opened and closed 3 years ago. And why did that happen, and things. I think those are things that make it a little bit more scary, a little bit like the opening the door. What did the Doctor see and with the Minotaur thing in the hotel to see his greatest fear? Okay. And you didn't see it. those kind of things I find that are a little bit more scary than long arms type thing. Does that make
Yeah, I think it's the implication of something must be here, but it's not registering as life signs and building on those fears. And I guess that's more difficult to do when you know all you've got is shots of something watching them, but then when you have a reveal, it's your same characters.
Yeah, I think they could have spent more time not knowing the characters were them to start off with. I think if they'd had that longer and not revealed themselves as quickly, I think that would have. But I think they wanted to do the arms dropping thing very quickly into the scene. So arms.
Yes. And for those who watched Doctor Who Unleashed, the behind the scenes program we now have, that was a practical thing of, David Tennant had his really long arms and that looked good because it was a practical effect. It certainly worked for me as a viewer because I could tell that there was a practical element to it. When they start, doing the weird, face drops and growing to the length, to the width, of the corridor and that sort of stuff. Again, it takes me out of it because I can tell that that's
not
artificial and that SFX.
I don't think they had enough time to finish the effect. It feels like they didn't have enough time to finish it as well as they wanted to. That's one. I think it will have worked for a lot of people, but I do think the build up didn't help. I think the fact that we've watched every episode of Doctor Who and probably we are not typical audience, okay? So it played into a lot of old of the Doctor Who's, and I personally have watched so much science fiction that it just okay, another science fiction type thing. No, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to trash it or anything like that. There was a lot of people that really said it was terrible online and mind you, we seem to collect them right now, but it wasn't something I'd never seen before. That was a good line to put to it. All right.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching live on YouTube, feel free to comment and let us know what your positives were and the bits you really liked about Wild Blue Yonder. I for instance will take on David Tennant and Catherine Tate. I thought they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Peter, that sort of duality of playing the Doctor and then a version that's looks like the Doctor but isn't the Doctor, like it's a really difficult thing to try and pull off, isn't it? And Tennant in particular managed it brilliantly.
And like I said, like I said before, you can sort of feel him holding back a tiny bit. Like it isn't it's not like a Kilgrave type characterization or a Bad Samaritan characterization at all. It's like slightly pulled back, slightly safer, but it's the thing that makes this whole episode scary, the thing that makes it work as well as it does, and the things that are working in it, is this fact that like the villains are wearing our heroes' faces, and not only that, but they've adopted a lot of their mannerisms and characteristics. So yeah, they did a really good job at that. I mean, one of the best sequences in the whole thing is that confrontation where they're challenging the Doctor to think out the problem and solve it, because as soon as he solves it, they'll know it too. And he's actively trying not to solve a problem, except he can't help himself. And it's a nice reversal in that it's almost in that moment, like the not thing, because apparently that's what they're called, the not things. The not thing Doctor is being the Doctor. He's the shape in that scene is the one that the Doctor normally plays, where he's taking his opponent's compulsions and using them against them, and sort of like forcing them to do what he wants them to do because they can't help themselves. so yeah, that was, and like his kind of look of wit and smart and triumph when he's getting the doctors to work it out was very doctorish, but like evil doctorish. So yeah, that was a really good scene. Catherine Tate was brilliant as Donna in this. I mean, she brings so much like natural emotion. She really hits that line that I don't think always works successfully with the last batch of companions, where her reactions feel like a natural, real person's, but at the same time they're heightened enough to match like the sort of like the heightened reality that Doctor Who is in. She's acting like someone that is in terrible danger, but at the same time it still feels like a bit of a science fiction fantasy type thing that's going on. I like her reaction when she was being left behind by the TARDIS was fantastic. It was phenomenal. I think there's a couple of times when she's playing the knot thing that you can tell that she's aware of the fact that like she's got goofy teeth in. And like, I mean, I think it's like that quote. Who was it said it about them? But there's an actor that said they were given a note once that don't have too much fun. And I did feel like Catherine Tate was having quite a bit of fun playing the knot thing, and sometimes you could tell how much fun she was, and it almost didn't matter because the knot thing is very pleased with itself. But at times it was like, look at me with my goofy teeth in.
Yeah. But they did evolve the knot things. So they did kind of move into their own character a little bit towards the end. So, but still it was anyway, I think we've gone through it enough.
Yeah. So again, you talk about the weird teeth and this thing about, you can't have anything that might be taken as offensive. Is the teeth a problem now?
I mean, that is slightly the problem whenever you go down that road. That like, yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you're saying we don't want to associate ugliness with, we don't want to associate like ugliness or the other with the bad guy. I mean, that's very laudable, and it's a good idea, but it is just a matter of changing where you draw the line, if you know what I mean, trying to move it into a more fantastic way. Because I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of the horror and a lot of the tension in Wild Blue Yonder comes from the idea, like you look at the knot things and you go like, oh, they're physically repulsive. That's how you can tell that they're the villains.
Yeah.
But like, it's like I said, it's just a matter of you change where whenever you're doing something like that, you're not actually saying, oh, that line doesn't exist. You're just changing where the line is to a place that you hope is more acceptable and less offensive to fewer people.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so
we do have a comment from one of the audience here.
Yeah. So just Jordan brings up a great point. The conversation between the Doctor and Donna is that I think it just their relationship in this episode is brilliant, and I think from the opening where they're trapped and the TARDIS is flown away, and 14 promises that he's going to bring her back home, through to when they're reconnecting, and what have you done since I last saw you, and a lot. There were some lovely character moments, and the real credit to the episode is those two leads, and how lucky we are that we've had them back for 3 episodes, but what a treat to watch them do their stuff again.
Well, I do think we're going to go about that scene with the flux, and when he was talking about what he'd done and everything like that. Peter and I were chatting about it before, and I think he made a great point, which was RTD has used it to reset right back to where Doctor Who was in the Rose, which is basically the flux and destroying the half of the universe. It's a bit like destroying Gallifrey. And I'm taking this away from you, Peter. I'm very sorry. Okay. and the fact that it's his guilt, and when is he going to recover from it? What was it, 1,000,000 years from now? He's okay, but recovering from it. And what did he do? So yeah, I think it was cleverly done to adopt something that allows it to return to where he's built on the guilt thing, and how does he deal with all the trauma that he's had, which is what Russell T. Davies' Doctor had, is basically a traumatized war veteran for most of it. That was what it started off as.
Yeah. I really like that, and I like the signpost to maybe insofar as the Time War was a theme before, maybe this will be a bit of a theme in terms of in Ncuti Gatwa's era. We might get we might touch a bit more on the fact that he really doesn't know where he's from. Maybe someone will show up at some point with a promise of being able to tell him where he's from.
Yeah,
and that will be his weak spot.
So the thing that I didn't like about The Timeless Child was essentially the Doctor was an abused child, basically. And I that was one of the things that I didn't like. But not knowing where he's coming from is fine. That worked for me. But it did bother me that we were basically abusing a child while he's growing up. And yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, The Timeless Child is kind of doubled down on to a certain extent, but again, you can still interpret as, well, the Doctor's not sure because he doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And whether, there's still that argument of maybe the Master was lying, or there's that theory of maybe it was just part of his plot, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't necessarily confirm it, it just puts that doubt in. And I think having that mystery around the character
is useful,
is great, and is what the Andrew Cartmel master plan back in season 25-26 tried to do, try and make this character more mysterious. And I don't think that's a bad way to go at all.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say in fairness, Tecturine also confirmed that the Doctor was the Timeless Child, so there's no real reason to disbelieve it. But I will say that, one thing that I don't know that they'll go down this route. It would be cool that when you look at where all of the pieces are on the puzzle table at the moment, the only person left that was around at the time is Rassilon, because he was kicked off Gallifrey before the end. So if they were to do something with that of the Doctor trying to get answers there, or happening across Rassilon somewhere, and then he's face to face with the only person that knew the Timeless Child that's still around.
Mm-hmm.
That could be an exciting thing.
You have to go dig up Omega again, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Omega isn't dead either, because he's just goal somewhere.
Yeah. So that's what I'd dig up instead of Rassilon. Dig up Omega. Okay.
See, now it's funny you mention Omega, because if they'd added a little hook of, well, whatever these creatures are, they've come from outside the universe and are trying to break into this universe, I'd have probably got on board a bit more with it. Because then it would have made logical sense. As it stands, we don't really know what they are, where they come from. They just happen to be on the ship, and that was it, really. That's something that's just occurred to me as you mentioned Omega. So, yeah, I think if I'd had that little bit of a hook, or that, not an explanation, just an idea planted, that otherwise they just sort of came on the ship and that was it, really.
Yeah, but I think just Jordan's comments here about how Catherine and David worked that scene just shows how well they worked together.
Yeah,
so I think it was definitely a valuable scene.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sorry, I was going to. Sorry, no, that's you.
No. I was just saying our cast list, going across the bottom on, it's very small,
Yeah.
but it is, Catherine Tate and David Tennant doing brilliant stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, particularly Catherine Tate. What I was going to say there was that, I mean, particularly Catherine Tate in that scene, because you know that David Tennant actually understands what he's talking about in that scene, in that moment, but you know that she doesn't. she wouldn't know the timeless child from like a hole in the road,
well,
or
I
the flux
have
from the moon in the sky, but like she still
so
sells it completely.
so.
I think that's almost like a. So I think it's almost like one of the great things with Russell T Davies writing, that he can break it down to that level, that like someone like Catherine Tate that's performing that role but isn't as deep into the lore of Doctor Who as most people that are watching it. He can break it down to the level of, oh, the Doctor doesn't know where he came from anymore.
Well, Catherine Tate, when she's interviewed, plays a character called Catherine Tate. I've seen her when she's actually interviewed for something else, or she'd been on it, and she's very, very smart, very, very quick. Not. I don't understand. Da, 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 da. No, she'll go and she had more points to it. So it's a character she's playing when she's interviewed, saying, I don't understand any of these things. I don't. Having watched a few of those interviews, I think she's a lot more cognizant about what's going on. Maybe not interested as much as somebody else, but I do think she does know what's going on.
Yes, even when she's doing Doctor Who Unleashed, she's she's playing up a little
She's
bit.
playing a Catherine. If you remember the Buzzcocks thing when Bernard Crimmins and Catherine Tate and David Tennant, they're playing that dance, okay, which is it's kind of an act. That's what it is, right? So, or playing there's one that clip out there from 8 out of 10 Cats where she can't figure out what the number is to it's a character she's playing.
Yeah. Okay. We've gone around the episode generally, but as yet we haven't talked about the pre-titles. Now, this has proved seriously controversial. There's a lot of chat and discussion on the platform formerly known as Twitter about this scene with Isaac Newton. Who wants to try and get their head around this?
Well, okay. So first off, I remembered that I knew who the character was, but I couldn't remember the actor. And then it's the character from It's a Sin. Second off, we have lots of actors out there that are of. He could have easily been the white version of Newton instead of him, quote, we've defined him as being another race. It didn't look out of place to me. It didn't look like we had somebody that was completely well, there's no completely different race, that we're all humans, right? But it didn't look out of place. He had the long hair and whatever. It didn't look like we had somebody who was, quote, a different race playing Newton. Other than that, I think it worked. I'm also used to watching the Royal Shakespeare Company play non-race parts. Anybody can play it.
Yeah.
I think there's a scene from Mark Gatiss where he talks about there was a black member of one of the light thing in Wales where they marched off into, or was it Scotland? But essentially, he was saying he was convinced to have a black character in there because there were black members of the Roman Legion and things.
Yeah.
So there's been multiracial characters all across England's history. We just don't necessarily acknowledge it. And I don't think he looked stunningly out of place on it at all. So that was my opinion. In fact, if you hadn't told me, I wouldn't have thought anything about it. So on Twitter, does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, Peter, I think it's because I feel it's established through paintings and whatever that Newton was white. I think that's what people have had an issue with, is because it's a historical person that we know factually was white, although he did, apparently have some Indian heritage and could quite easily have looked mixed race. And
I didn't think he looked out of place. Okay, I mean that was really what I'm saying. It didn't look like somebody from. Well, I don't know what you would say that's not whatever, but he didn't look out of place to me, and I wouldn't have even thought about the discussion unless somebody had brought it up.
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, there's the generalized thing, because I mean, it's one of these things where it operates at a few different levels. Firstly, that you don't really look for realism in this sort of thing. It's not really required that you go, oh, how likely is that, or would that character actually have looked like that, etc. But I mean, I can see the thing that when you have a historical character that, it's not about race so much as resembling the image that people already have of them. That, when it's someone that people have seen a lot of paintings of, whether we were talking about the fact that the image that someone has of them is that they were quite short in real life, through the images that we have of them. You wouldn't necessarily cast, a short but thin guy as Oliver Hardy type of thing in a biopic. It's a general thing. But I mean, at the same time, everyone's tolerances for that, definitely in terms of the people producing things, people's tolerance on how much the person has to physically, if you're playing a real person, how much that person should physically resemble the person that they're playing. There's a lot I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do it. You get some productions that go incredibly overboard, with vast prosthetics to try and make the person look exactly like the person. I don't think that's really required. I mean, to be honest, my main thing with that scene is that it's a fight that I've given up long ago, because it's just a standard Doctor Who thing of, it's a historical figure that really was not a very nice person at all, and he's just presented as like a comedy pal for the Doctor, completely glossing over what a terrible person he was.
Well, it's okay. So let's go on the opposite. You said what the character looked like. We had Shakespeare in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Shakespeare didn't look like that.
Okay.
We basically pulled up to put it in the mannerism of this thing. We pulled up a hot Shakespeare. Okay. And Shakespeare, from all the pictures I've seen, did not look hot. Okay.
Yeah.
So he looked more like David Mitchell.
That's quite a cruel sequence. If he wasn't hot, he looked like David Mitchell. Poor David Mitchell.
Apologies, David Mitchell, if you're watching. We do think you're hot.
But anyway, the character that he plays in, what is it? The Shakespeare play. Shakespeare.
Shakespeare.
Yeah.
He plays Shakespeare, but I can't remember what the show is called off the top of my head.
Doctor Who.
No, the
Shakespeare Code.
No, it's I would remember it.
Upstart Crow.
Upstart Crow. That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I knew there was Crow in it somewhere. But I mean, the Doctor Who character that we had was hot. Now, when they did Elizabeth I, that's a lot more restrictive in terms of what you can do. You can't play Elizabeth I with black hair. I mean, Elizabeth I is a redhead, as far as anyone's concerned. Very pale skin, and whereas the funny dresses were, you cut off your top of your chest off and things like that. So she has to look like that. Whether it's the lady who was in Upstairs, Downstairs. I'm forgetting names all over the place here. Or it is
Dame Judi Dench, or
Dame Judi Dench, or any of these people.
Yeah.
You know, forget about this. They sort of all look like a stamp of Elizabeth I. The same thing goes for Anne Boleyn. But
I think less so because she's possibly less established. But no, yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, I think that goes back to what I was saying before, that it's a matter of resemblance. Other people draw the line in different places. I mean, you're right that this is hardly the first time that a historical character has been played by an actor that hasn't really looked like them. I mean, Ian McNeice really doesn't look anything like Winston Churchill, at all. Like, I mean, and that's just part of it. So, I mean, I guess it's a question of, when people have criticisms, how consistent are they being? If they want to criticize all of those casting choices, because people did complain. Let's face it, people did complain about Hot Shakespeare. They were like, "How dare you make me hot for Shakespeare?" I am. It has changed my understanding of myself.
Okay. Anyway, I was just trying to think of what other hot character we possibly had, which is Hot Shakespeare.
I mean, there's always creative license, and you know, you're casting actors to play a role. And I think, for me, I agree with his comment from Just Jordan again. I don't think it added anything.
That was the biggest problem I had with the thing.
Yeah.
The only thing I was trying to figure out was the woman in the scene, and I meant to look it up. Is she an ongoing character?
Susan Twist, I doubt it. No.
Okay.
Probably not.
Because there's one that we have. I think it's somebody else, but that was the only thing I was wondering, and I didn't chase it down to look up. But it was incongruous. Didn't fit in. Thank you. It didn't fit in. It kind of jarred against the episode. Now, granted, there were spinny things and stars and vortexes in between that and getting stop on the planet. But yes.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it added anything. I think you could have done without it. It's just created Twitter wars and arguments, and yeah, I could have done without it. But let's move on to something we can all agree was the highlight. Bernard Cribbins back as Now I have to admit I was a bit annoyed last week when he didn't appear, because we all knew that he'd been involved in filming, and I expected him in that first one because it was set on that street, you know, outside Cyberdog in Camden, and so I was a bit disappointed that that he wasn't in that episode. But this just, it was beautiful, absolutely superb stuff. I'm so glad to have him back.
Yeah.
Well, I think he was supposed to be in as much as he could physically do, and I suspect there were other scenes that. Well, in fact, Russell T. Davies said there were other scenes that got cut.
I almost think, I suspect as part of that, because I know, I think what you said, Susan, at the top of the podcast, that it felt like the episode had a weird structure of, there was a completely unrelated scene at the start, then there was the main adventure, and then there was a completely unrelated scene at the end. And I almost feel like this might originally have been intended to be the pre-titles of The Giggle, only they were too aware that if you open it with Bernard Cribbins in it and then go into the titles, and then when you come back to it, he's not there anymore, then it creates too much pressure. Like, people will just be going, well, where is he? What has happened to him? What's going on? While if you moved it to this, then you can give him his moments, and then you can sort of, as Russell T. Davies did, explain afterwards that, like, now just to prepare you, he's not in the next episode, because this was the only scene that he was well enough to film. So, I mean, I suspect that it was moved forward from the next episode, But I mean, I think if that's true, then it was a good decision, and I think it works really well.
You needed to be honored for the whole thing. So I've lost my dad in, I guess, the beginning of September, end of August, and it just, and we watched the Railway Children and things like that, and it just hurt, just brought up a lot of things for me. So and I could see his frailty, and I recall seeing my dad's frailty at that particular time. So it's just, I'm so glad he was there, but I don't know. I think it's a bit too close for me to try and talk about it. I'm going to try and write something up, but it's been a little bit, it just ties in too closely to where I am right now. And he did have just the look of the frailty that my dad had, and he anyway, I'm not going to go any further into it, but it was a beautiful scene, and we're so lucky he was in this episode. So yeah. I'm glad he came back.
Yeah, and I think actually putting it into this episode, as you say, Pete, is probably a better decision, because it would have been overshadowed by the events of the Giggle, which obviously we haven't seen yet. But if there's going to be a regeneration at the end, and you've got Shooty and all that stuff, to have Bernard Cribbin's scene end Wild Blue Yonder, and for Bernard Cribbins to be trending on Twitter, and and everyone talking about what he's just an amazing legend of television and film, and to have this final moment was just beautiful. And completely endorse everything you said, both of you. Just wonderful moment. Okay, let's finish on the numbers. So last week we had 5.08. I'm frantically trying to fill while it comes across my ticker on the bottom there. So today, Wild Blue Yonder overnight figures, which is the only number we've got so far officially, really, was 4.83. So down slightly from 5.08, but it's retained its audience. And these things are really difficult these days, because you've got streaming. Disney Plus is now a factor globally. In the UK, I last week I didn't watch it live. I had it saved on my digital box, and it's all these numbers are being calculated, and where do we go with the numbers? Basically, Peter, you're the numbers man.
It's hard to appreciate because sometimes people just see the word drop and they're automatically, ooh. But I mean, the figures, a second episode almost always gets less than the first episode. In fact, there's only one time that it hasn't happened, and it was David Tennant's first series was the only time that Tooth and Claw got more than New Earth. But that's the only time in Doctor Who's modern history that's happened. There's always a drop, and in fact, I was working out earlier on, and the average drop is 13% from the first episode to the second episode, and this one was just under 5%. So that's really holding an audience from one episode to another. They wouldn't have come back if they didn't think the Star Beast was great. And while we don't have official confirmation yet, it looks like the catch-up viewing in the past week for the Star Beast has been massive. One of the biggest like ever. It's just certainly as a percentage.
That's the +7, isn't it?
I thought it was almost 8, but that it didn't get to
it looks like it'll be around, is somewhere between 7.4 and 7.6. It looks like, which is huge. And to put that in perspective, I know I was telling you guys before we came on YouTube, but it's pretty much, it's almost exactly the same viewing figure as saw John Sim as the Master, like raining down hell on earth in The Sound of Drums. Like it's actually matching. It's not up there with the top of David Tennant's old episodes, but it's actually matching some of the really big episodes of his tenure. You could slot the figures for the Star Beast in between any of David Tennant's previous seasons, and it wouldn't stand out as, oh, what happened there? Which, considering the changes in the landscape of viewing figures since then, is incredible. It is actually phenomenal.
Well, I think the other thing that I don't do necessarily is I don't necessarily watch stuff in the first 7 days. For the Doctor Who is special because we review it, we go through it, and all the other stuff. But I mean, Slow Horses or the monster thing that's on Apple TV, or Star Trek on Paramount, or all these things, I'm sort of waiting 3 episodes in before I actually start watching them, and then I'll watch 3 episodes in a row, and I'm not missing anything because they're a lot of the let's watch this show tonight thing has disappeared. You watch the show in the next little while has come about, or you watch all of them when something like I don't know what's the one that's released everything recently. I think it was The Crown that's released all the people watch all the show, all the episodes in one night or something like that. It's a different viewing audience, and it has done exceptionally well, and as was stated, it has had the best dramatic premiere this year.
Yeah, I will just say that is on the overnights. It looks like on the +7 it won't quite overtake Happy Valley, but yeah, certainly with the number the initial number that we got, it was the biggest night for drama, if you like, for biggest night for a drama launch in the year. The most people sitting around their television all year. It's got like, oh, this new show is starting, we have to watch it.
Yeah, and I think you're gonna find out that the numbers, the 28-day numbers, are really the ones that everybody should be looking at, which is when it's how much has been watched in a month. Those are the ones, and then it obviously collects over the year or anything like that. Because I mean, it's kind of like our numbers on some of the posts that we do. We'll write something, and every so often there'll be a post that we wrote 3 months ago that has got linked to something else, and why is this thing spiked up? We find out it's been used in a topic somewhere else that makes it spike up.
But I think, well, next week we've got The Giggle, and let's be honest, I would expect the numbers to go up because everyone who's vaguely interested in Doctor Who loves a regeneration episode, and the trailer suggested we're gonna get that in the next
and everybody wants to know what happens to the 14th Doctor and why.
It's the Doctor Who thing. As soon as somebody's cast, everyone wants to know when they're leaving so they can get a regeneration episode to watch again.
I'm gonna stay away from the wild rumors that I've been reading around, just because I'd like, if it's true,
keep your sanity.
I have
if it's not true, which is more likely, then keep your sanity as well. But I mean, I've just the few scenes I've seen with now my brain is forgetting everything.
Neil Patrick Harris.
Thank you very much. Okay, Neil Patrick Harris. I'm proving that I'm the oldest one here. Okay, Neil Patrick Harris. He just seems to hit it perfectly. I mean, the dancing around and he's recognizing me and things like that. He's remembering and things. So I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, and I do think he will bring in more viewers because he's in that kind of zone where, in the Venn diagram there will be a lot of people excited by Neil Patrick Harris that don't necessarily watch Doctor Who, but at the same time he's like, you kind of, when you say, oh, Neil Patrick Harris is going to be a Doctor Who villain, even when you don't know anything about that, like people that like Doctor Who and people that like Neil Patrick Harris will go like, "Ooh, that sounds like a good combination."
Right.
So I'm particularly, I think it's going to have a big impact on Disney, where we don't have, because streamers are like that. We don't have very firm
Don't
numbers
tell
on
you
it.
the numbers, really. Yeah.
But we do have a vision of a daily top 10 for
Mhm.
Disney Plus across the week, and Doctor Who has spent most of the week in the top 10, peaking at number 3 on one of the days, like, and that's worldwide. So
So
you know,
worldwide, it's doing well, even though Disney hasn't been promoting it that much. Which they're going to start for the Christmas episode.
yes, with Shooting Atwood's arrival, because I mean, I do appreciate for them and their audience, it's a slightly awkward thing that for a BBC audience, it's like, oh wow, David Tennant is coming back. For Disney Plus promoting it as a new show, it's a bit of a weird situation to say, here's a guy for 3 episodes, and then we're going to change everything. So I think that's why they've kind of gone like, oh well, this is just like this is the starter, and then we'll promote Judy Gatwell's first episode as like, oh, this is the big deal that you should start watching.
About. Mind you, I do think we're going to have more people complaining that this is as woke as it has been since 1963. So we do get the standard. This episode is woke, but it has been woke since 1963. I think we should just carry on that same pattern.
It's working until now.
It's working now, right? So
we're getting a new series. It feels like a fresh start, and it's still the same show though.
It is the same.
I really want to know if the season 1 business sticks, because they've tried that before and it hasn't stuck.
Yeah,
who knows what it means when they do it.
Yeah.
So when we get the stuff from the BBC, it didn't have a season. It is the 60th anniversary, episode 1, 2, and 3, and those are what those are named. And then the stuff that we get from Shooty's stuff is season 1. Right?
Yeah.
Episode 1. Okay, well, we'll go back to counting differently again. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be slightly different this time, because definitely Disney are going to be promoting it as season 1.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's ultimately one of those things where I think the fans kind of decides based on, can I understand the conversation that I'm in, or am I completely confused?
Yeah. Well, we've gone back to seasons instead of series, which all the modern ones were, having been seasons before. So
we could go back to the Quiz of Rassilon and try and figure out the numbers sequence thing.
Yes, bring back production codes. That's what we
production codes. Yes, I forgot about it.
We want production codes.
Yes. Well, so you really want to be messed up.
So we'll be back next week and we'll talk all about the giggle. I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure there'll be a lot of promotion and excitement as the week goes on and we get closer to Saturday. And Neil Patrick Harris is the toy maker, and David Tennant's last one for however long he stays away this time.
He's not going to stay away. Okay, I'm really sure. I don't believe a single thing he says about, I'm going to stay away. No.
Bring him back. Okay, say goodbye, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. Farewell.
Bye.